Welcome, one and all, to the Hammer Territory Podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. As always, a pleasure to be with you wherever you are and wherever you are listening. I hope that you are having a wonderful start to your week. I believe this is show 112. I need to do a better job of keeping up with the number of shows that we have done. It's crazy to think that we've done that many in this few short months. We've been a part of Foul Territory, a great, great family of baseball podcast, but always a pleasure to be with you, and especially a pleasure to be with my podcast partner, Stephen Tolbert. Stephen, good to talk with you, sir. Hope you've had a good start to the week as well.
Yeah, what's up, Shawn? Yeah, man, it's good to be back with you. Obviously, got an interesting show tonight. Have had some news that's popped in the last 24, 48 hours. The show we were planning on doing was a little bit different than the one we're actually going to do because we had enough news drop where we could pretty much focus on stuff that's actually happening versus, things that might happen, which was kind of the original idea of the show. So, yeah, good show tonight. It's always good to be on with you, man.
Absolutely. And to your point, if you, the past couple of shows that we've done, we really have kind of done our, a few off-season premieres, if you will, looking at, several trade candidates. I believe it came to up to 20 to 25 names last week that me, you, and Scott talked about. And then on Sunday, Brad and Scott both went over several notable pitching names that would make sense for the Braves, and we'll touch on that a bit later on in the episode. But let's get to the news of the day that I think is most notable, and that, of course, is the fact that with just within less than 2 weeks since the Braves decided, or actually it was last week, it was last Monday, so 8 days ago, the Braves made the decision not to exercise Travis d'Arnaud's $8 million option for 2025. Me and you talked about the reason why they made that decision. Well, today, Travis d'Arnaud actually, it looked as if the Braves, may stick around, with the idea of signing d'Arnaud if he hung around this offseason. That's not the case. Travis d'Arnaud today signed a 2-year, $12 million deal with the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Now, it may be a bit of a surprise that d'Arnaud signed this early in the offseason. I think he got a pretty fair deal. I don't think his destination is a surprise because, with Perry Maniason, being, a former, member of Alex Anthopoulos' front office here in Atlanta, it's not a surprise that once again, a former Brave winds up in LA. But what I do think this clearly shows, Stephen, is that now the Braves have no choice. They're going to need to add a catcher to the situation if they're not fully committed to Drake Baldwin being the backup. And with Travis d'Arnaud now signed in LA, be a bit interesting to see what direction the Braves go with the catcher to pair with Sean Murphy moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, we knew, as soon as we got the notification that they weren't bringing d'Arnaud back on his option, 1 million or 1 year, 8 million was a reasonable contract for Travis. And, you brought up the point that when they figured out that Joe Jimenez was essentially going to be a $9 million loss on the payroll, that they needed to free up some money to go potentially get a reliever. And that's part of the reason they didn't bring Travis back. And that very well could be the case. But once he got released and put out on the free agent market, Travis instantly became probably the top catcher on the market. It's not a great catcher's market for if you're looking for like a starting caliber catcher. And that was my concern with trying to wait around to bring him back, is that a team that needed to go get, help at catcher could be very aggressive with Travis because they know that after him, it's not a great a roster of catchers on the free agent market. So, and that's what happened. The Angels went out and gave him a 2-year, $12 million contract. It's good money for Travis, obviously at his age, the concussion stuff that he's dealt with, to get 2 guaranteed years, real money. Of course, you have to take that. So, now the Braves are, like you said, now the Braves are in it. Travis d'Arnaud is gone, and none of us expected that 10 days ago. I don't know what the odds would have been that we would have been sitting here on November 12th talking about Travis d'Arnaud signing with the Angels, but it would have been pretty low when the all season started. So, yeah, now the question shifts. And we talked about this a little on the show we did about this, but are they comfortable with Drake Baldwin playing so little, 25, 30% of the time? I doubt it. I'm still in the mindset that I highly doubt they're going to let this guy just sit on the bench for most of the year. Now, you could argue he could, help DH, help an outfield. Maybe they do that, but we have no indication they're going to do that. If you go just by catcher reps, he would sit most of the time. And I just don't know if they're going to do that. So like you said, it shifts to, are they going to go get a backup catcher? This is a really good market if you're trying to go get a backup catcher, because there's a lot of backup catchers out there. It's starting catchers that you have a hard time finding at the moment. So there's plenty of names. You and I were talking about Yasmani Grandal before we got on, because he's a switch hitter. He could help balance out the lineup. He still had a pretty good year last year. So maybe they do that. Maybe they trust Chadwick Trump to be that guy. The good thing about Trump is he knows the pitching staff really well. He spent a decent amount of time in Atlanta because of how much time Sean Murphy missed last year. I think that's an underrated part of this. I think that matters, that Trump has caught all of the Braves pitchers before and knows them. That might give him a leg up. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see if they add somebody, but I do not think it's going to be Drake Baldwin. I'm still kind of, towing that line. I don't think they're going to let this kid sit on the bench for 80% of the time in 2025.
Well, and I think that it brings up another interesting point, because while Travis d'Arnaud was the backup catcher, but he did play, for a good portion over the past 2 seasons, especially, since July of 2023, there were times, where he would play months on end as if he was a starting catcher. But the other part of it is that what are you looking for? What are you valuing in a backup catcher role? One thing that I think stands out for a lot of teams is that it may surprise many that more teams don't go after more offensively minded backup catchers. But I think that a lot of teams value that backup catcher role as somebody that can be good on defense, can really help in the preparation when it comes to the pitching approach towards games, and has more of a defensive upside than an offensive upside. But for the Braves in particular, Travis d'Arnaud was our main go-to guy when it came to pinch hitting as well several times over the past couple of years. He had a knack for delivering in the big moment. So I know we probably are going to have Jared Kelenic off the bench is mainly our main bat against right-handed pitching. But what are your thoughts, Stephen, on what qualities you value in that backup catcher? Is it going to get a bat that has at least some upside that could be that, go-to pinch hitter? Or do you feel that it makes sense to value that defense and that added value when it comes to the pitching preparation, that we see pitchers and catchers do before games?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's definitely the latter. I would say I definitely lean more towards the pitching defense. With Travis specifically, and one thing we do need to say is that Travis was a massive, massive influence in that clubhouse. Like, he was one of the team leaders. He's been with this team since 2020. He was one of the only guys left that was on the World Series team. If you go look at that 2021 roster and go look at this roster, there's not a lot of leftovers. You got Ozzie, you got Riley, you're about to lose Max, you might lose Morton, you might lose Minter. The number of guys that were on that 2021 team is dwindling fast. And obviously with Travis, we just lost another one. So he was a leader in that clubhouse. And that's why I thought maybe they might go get a guy like Grandal, 36, been around, knows the league, a veteran guy. I think having veterans in the clubhouse is probably something that the general public probably doesn't think a lot about or care enough about, that actually does matter a lot to a team and a GM and a manager. So yeah, I'll be interested what they do. Trump definitely has the leg up because he's just been with the team for so long. He's been up a lot, with the injuries over the last couple of years. He knows the pitching staff. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they just went with him. He's also cheap, which, helps a lot right now. So they might just do that. But if they went out and got a veteran, and it doesn't have to be Grandal. I said Grandal, he's a switch hitter and he's a veteran, but it could be a lot of guys. There's a lot of backup catchers on the market. But yeah, my guess is they're going to value defense first in that backup catcher spot. And yeah, it'll be interesting where they go.
Yeah, whatever direction the Braves decide to go will certainly be interesting to see. But I think that the other thing that this does point out is that this team clearly is committed to Sean Murphy. We won't go into too much on that. I don't think many doubted that. But if anybody did need further confirmation, you have it here. Sean Murphy is the mainstay for this Braves, for the Braves backstop. It'll be interesting to see who the Braves eventually go get as a backup. But without a doubt, Sean Murphy is the guy moving forward. And of course, also will be very interesting to see how this team handles Drake Baldwin.
Hey, I want to make one more point, because somebody brought this up to me after we did the last show that you and I talked about the catching spot. And I thought it was a good point, and it needs to be said. The problem with Drake Baldwin being a backup, of course, is that if you want Murphy to catch 80% of the time, 75% of the time, then that means he sits 25% of the time. That's the problem, right? Everybody knows that. But if you're looking from the other side, that problem isn't necessarily going away next year either. And the Braves have Murphy locked up for 5 years, I think, something like that. I don't know exact deals of the contract. I think it's like 5 years left on his deal. And, there's going to be people that think trading Baldwin is the best use of his value because this problem isn't going away next year. You don't have a solution next year either. If you don't want Baldwin to be a backup catcher and you already have a primary catcher signed for multiple years into the future, then you can kick the can down the road for maybe another year and see if Murphy gets hurt again or if Murphy is not as good and you need to move on, then, keeping Baldwin matters. But that is a valid point that just because it doesn't work this year doesn't mean next year is just going to automatically solve itself. It's kind of the same problem next year. And I don't know if that will factor into their decision of what they're going to do with Baldwin. I would think they're going to hold on to him now that d'Arnaud's gone, but that's a fair point in that the same problem that you're going to have this year with not wanting Baldwin to be the backup, you're going to have next year too, assuming that Murphy's not going anywhere. So that does need to be said. It might be factored into what they do. We'll see, but that is a notable point.
Looking for recipes to bring the autumn feels? Hello, have you tried HelloFresh yet? America's #1 meal kit gives you over 50 recipes to choose from. Each week, they pre-portion the ingredients and then they ship them right to your doorstep.
Picky eaters like Scott or people looking to fit a specific lifestyle have met their match. HelloFresh features preferences like fit and wholesome, quick and easy, or vegetarian.
HelloFresh helps me eat healthier and maintain my presence as a popular chef at home with my kids. I'm bringing variety to the dinner table.
Just stop with the endless recipe searching or you're spending a whole bunch of money on a big jar of spices just for a pinch. That's all you need. You can also get step-by-step recipe cards, making cooking simpler by using HelloFresh.
Get 10 free meals at HelloFresh.com/freeFT. Applied across 7 boxes, new subscribers only, varies by plan. That's 10 free HelloFresh meals just by going to HelloFresh.com/freeFT.
Which brings up the point that I think it's going to be very interesting to see what the Braves decide to do, with that backup catcher. If they wind up signing a guy kind of like they did d'Arnaud for, multiple years in a row, a 1-year deal with an option for a second year, I think that kind of puts an indication in there that, while we clearly think Drake Baldwin probably is valuable, he's highly valued in this organization, I think it could keep the door open to where in the right deal he could be available. But speaking of available, the big thing for the Braves, that for the second straight offseason, it may be a surprise, is that one thing that we've consistently talked about here, and so far in, this the short start or the short time that we've been in the baseball offseason, we've mainly had pitchers that have been connected to the Braves, Stephen. And so that, to me, again, proves the point that pitching, once again, is going to be a focus of the Braves this offseason. But Jeff Passan, who came out with his, usual big offseason outlook piece, he had that on Tuesday. He made a couple of points that were pretty eye-opening when it came to the Braves. For one, many, including myself, had thought it was a very real chance that veteran Charlie Morton could potentially retire at the end of the 24 season. But Passan, as well as a few others, have indicated, Passan's indication probably the most emphatic, the most clear that it's going to happen. Charlie Morton will pitch another year, it seems. He wants to come back and pitch at the age of 41. And past comments from him would make it seem as if that the reason why he wouldn't want to pitch would probably be because he feels it's going to be in Atlanta. So I ask you this question, Stephen. I think it makes sense for the Braves to bring Charlie Morton back, especially with his durability. But where is he on the priority list? How much of a priority, or if they bring Morton back, how satisfying is that for this starting rotation? Is it a pure priority? Is it more of a back burner type opportunity? What makes sense? Where is he on the priority list?
I think you have to aim higher first. Because you're losing Max Fried almost certainly, and you have no idea what you're going to get from Spencer Strider next year, when he's going to come back, or when he does come back, how good he's going to be. That's 2 aces, that you don't know. One, you're losing outright, and the other, you don't know what you're going to get next year. So I think they need to aim higher than Charlie Morton first and foremost. The guys, Brad and Scott did a show on Sunday about free agent pitchers, you need to go listen to that show. They went over a ton of names. Nathan Eovaldi was kind of the big name that came up. Like that's a level of guy that the Braves need to target like as a priority, like the number one guy you go after, because he's a guy that can sit at the top of a rotation with Sale. He can be a number 2 starter, a high end number 3 starter. Still very good. And so if they wanted to add Morton to the rotation, I'm fine with that. I'm not fine with them only adding Morton to the rotation. The fact that Morton is interested in pitching in 2025 and he still doesn't have a deal with the Braves is notable to me. This feels like something that would have gotten done. Like a lot of times they redid his deal in September, a lot of years where they would just re-up him again and again and again and again. And it usually never even got to the offseason. So the fact that we're already into November and they don't have a deal means, to me at least, that the Braves are shopping in a different aisle. They're aiming higher than Morton. I think they could do Morton and Eovaldi, like, for example, somebody at that level. Like, I wouldn't pay Charlie Morton any more than $10 million next year. I would probably try to get him for less than that, maybe like $5 to $8 million. But he might, other teams might have something to say about that. But in the past, Charlie has made it clear that he doesn't want to move all over the country to play baseball. Like he said in the past, he wanted to play for the Braves or the Rays. He wanted to stay in the Southeast. I don't know if that's still the case for him. I would think so, but I don't know. So I don't know how much competition is out there in terms of actually being able to sign Charlie Morton. But yeah, if you can get Charlie for $5, $8, $10 million at the most, I would be okay with that. I'm not okay with that being the only move you make in the rotation, though, because losing Max Fried, having no clue what you're going to get from Spencer Strider next year, all the other stuff, Chris Sale throwing more innings than he's thrown in 5 years, Ronaldo Lopez, same thing, Spencer Swallenbach, same thing. I think you need a really good pitcher to add to this rotation, and I would aim higher than Charlie Morton. Nathan Eovaldi, we can talk about other names, but I would hope that they're aiming higher than Morton to start out with.
And I know that so much has been discussed when it comes to what the Braves have done during the regular season over the past 2 years, the historic offense in 2023, the fall off in 2024, how good the starting pitching was in the regular season. But make no mistake about it, I know that there has been 3 straight years of playoff disappointments. This is still a team that, in my opinion, and I think in the opinions of many, probably is in the top 5 or top 6 when it comes to favorites for the World Series, not only next year, but for years to come. And when you're in that status, when you made 7 straight playoffs and you're likely, you're hoping to make 10 or more straight as you move forward, your decisions on who you want to add to your core, a lot of times it should be based off who's going to help you out in the playoffs versus who's going to help you out in the regular season. And that's what we're talking about when it comes to aiming higher. Someone like a Nathan Eovaldi, like a Chris Sale, has had clear playoff success. Both of those have played big roles in World Series runs for their teams. And I know Charlie Morton did the same thing for us in the past, but with his age, I agree with you. He's someone who definitely is there to have a nice, not stopgap, but safety valve type option. He could be your 6th starter, especially as Strider is going to be out for the first of the season. But they definitely need to aim higher for someone who could be a difference maker in the playoffs. But Nathan Eovaldi is just one name now that has been connected to the Braves this offseason. In that same piece where Passan talked about Charlie Morton coming back, Boston Red Sox free agent pitcher Nick Pivetta, a familiar name to Braves fans. We've faced him many a time over the years. He's someone who had a pretty decent season for Boston. They did offer him a qualifying offer. The latest report is that he's probably likely to decline it. But the Braves seem to potentially be a team that will have interest in Pivetta as being maybe a mid-tier type starter, not necessarily to the level of perhaps a Nathan Eovaldi, but if Eovaldi were to price himself out of the Braves range, maybe Pivetta becomes an option. But Stephen, I think you had an interesting take about Pivetta earlier today with that qualifying offer. Why would the Braves still have interest in him, even though that qualifying offer is attached to him?
Yeah, so qualifying offers are a funny thing. They can be a tricky thing. So obviously, the qualifying offer is essentially the top, usually 8 to 10 free agents in a free agent class all get a qualifying offer attached to their name. That essentially means that whoever signs them, if another team signs that free agent, then the team that player just left gets a draft pick as compensation. And that also means that the team that signs them loses a draft pick or multiple draft picks, depending on luxury tax and, payroll. It gets a little bit complicated, but effectively, when you have a player that's on a qualifying offer like Pivetta, it suppresses his market because now there's an extra tax essentially added to signing him, right? You have to pay him the money that you're going to pay him no matter what, but then you also have to give up the draft pick. And for a lot of teams, that's a non-starter. Like they just won't go near that. Like they value draft picks too much. Depending on where you are in the luxury tax and payroll threshold, it can actually be a pretty high draft pick too. So for a lot of teams, that's a non-starter. They're just not going to sign a qualifying offer free agent, which means that even though the qualifying offer is an extra tax that adds what you have to pay, a lot of times you can actually get pretty good value on these guys, especially if they're fringe qualifying offer guys like Pivetta. People were very surprised that Pivetta was going to get that. He ended up getting one. Not a lot of people saw that coming. And so when you have guys like that are right on the edge of should they get a qualifying offer, shouldn't they? The amount that their market gets suppressed by that QO can be so much that they actually become a bargain essentially. And I don't know. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with Pivetta, but that certainly can happen. I remember a few years ago, it happened to Craig Kimbrell, and he didn't end up signing till like June, the year that he signed with the Cubs, because teams didn't want to pay for the draft pick along with the free agent contract. I think it happened to Dallas Keuchel as well. I think the Braves are actually the one that ended up signing Dallas Keuchel for a very cheap contract. This was a perfect example of what I'm talking about. That qualifying offer can be such a deterrent for teams that you can actually end up getting guys pretty cheap. And the qualifying or the draft pick you have to give up ends up being the most expensive thing you have to give up to get them. So we'll see what that happens. I mean, I don't love Nick Pivetta as a pitcher. Quite honestly, I think he's more of a back end guy than a front end guy. He has a real home run problem. He gives up a ton of homers. He's solid. Don't get me wrong. He's not bad, but he's another one of those guys where I would hope the Braves would aim higher first and then maybe pivot to Pivetta if it doesn't work out, because there's a decent amount of pitching in this market. There's ways to go get really good pitchers if you want to, and even on the trade market as well, which we talked about in our last episode. So, but yeah, the qualifying offer can be a tricky thing. It can go both ways. It's kind of a double-edged sword, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out for Pivetta. I'm guessing his market is much more suppressed now than it was going to be before the Red Sox slapped that qualifying offer on him.
And one final thought on this is that I agree with you. And the thing about it is this, is that when we talk about a Morton or when we talk about a Pivetta, I think that the Braves' interest in those pitchers are them doing their due diligence. They want to make sure there's levels to this, right? They want to make sure that they're covered. If they're, top guys that they want to go get are either too pricey or it just, doesn't fit in terms of, the preferences that those arms have. They want to be able to have backup options that they can go get. Pivetta and Charlie Morton are those options. But I think that when you talk about upside, it's not only, upside that we've recently seen in terms of Nathan Eovaldi, and then, he had another pretty good year last year, but also a former teammate of Nathan Eovaldi's, Jordan Montgomery. In Passan's piece, he talked about that Jordan Montgomery is one of the most likely players to be traded, and the Diamondbacks would even potentially pay down, his contract. That right there is absolutely up Alex Anthopoulos' alley. And I think that anybody would agree that Jordan Montgomery probably has a higher ceiling than Nick Pivetta. So when we see these names, and we'll probably see more connected to the Braves, I think that it's just them doing their due diligence on backup options. At the end of the day, I still think they're going to go with a player that could be a good number 2 option even in the playoffs, someone with a proven track record. And I think that's why you are going to see them really try for an Eovaldi or a Montgomery, for instance, before they settle for a Morton or a Pivetta.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, they're going to add somebody. Like, in his postseason presser, Alex talked about how pitching wasn't going to be a priority. They had, they love their top 4 with Strider, Sale, Lopez, and Swellenbach. And again, one of those things, you just can't listen to a word that comes out of Alex's mouth in those things. Like, pitching was always going to be a priority. Losing Max, potentially losing Morton, all the guys coming back, having tons of inning on their arm last year, they need to be in the market. And I think they need to be, I don't know if they'll be in the very top of the market. Like, I don't think Corbin Burns is coming to Atlanta. But that next tier, like the Eovaldi tier, I think the Braves will be heavily in that market, if not the trade market, which you were talking about with Jordan Montgomery, Kevin Gallsman, the guys we talked about, even like a guy like Zach Gallen. People forget Zach Gallen's on his last year of control with the Diamondbacks, and they have not been able to sign him to an extension. And usually small market teams who get star players that close to free agency, I'm not saying they definitely trade him, but they'll have conversations about trading Zach Gallen this winter. We'll see if anything happens, but so there are some interesting names in the trade market as well, but the Braves are going to be aggressive in the pitching market. I have a strong feeling.
Well, we talk about what the priorities are for the Braves this offseason. Well, I think another, very interesting, kind of on the back burner, kind of an underrated aspect of the Braves offseason is how are we going to watch the Braves in 2025 and beyond? When we talk about what potentially is a priority for this Braves team, we can talk about several different topics. But for the Braves fan base, probably at the top of their priority list is getting settled on how they can watch the Braves in 2025 and moving forward. And Stephen, you have done a marvelous job through writing over at Battery Power, as well as, a couple of excerpts that you have had here on the Hammer Territory. What is the latest with that? Because we could see a pretty substantial update later this week as far as the scenario goes when it comes to the Braves and how they can be viewed by the fan base and baseball fans in general in 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, we're coming to the end of this thing finally. Diamond Sports Group, who is the company that operates, it used to be called Bally Sports, it's now called FanDuel Sports, but the company that operates that network is Diamond Sports Group. They've been in bankruptcy for about 18 months. Brad and I covered all this on a show we did a few weeks ago. And essentially what's happening is they are trying to restructure their company in a way that allows them to exit bankruptcy court and still function as an operating company. And in order to do that, they have to put forth a plan in front of the bankruptcy court, and that plan has to be accepted by the judge and the creditors. Well, the hearing for that is this week. It's at the end of this week. I think it's a 2-day hearing. I think it's a Thursday, Friday hearing. The deadline for any objections to the restructuring plan was last week, and both the Major League Baseball and the Atlanta Braves both formally objected to the plan, which basically means they're telling the courts they don't think the plan is good enough for Diamond Sports Group to be able to stay out of bankruptcy again a year from now or 2 years from now. They think if this plan was approved by the court, that Diamond Sports would just be right back in bankruptcy next year or the year after. And so we're going to get an answer to this. And again, it matters for Braves fans because if Diamond Sports Group does not make it out of bankruptcy court, then where the Braves are going to be on TV in 2025 is just completely up in the air. We don't know. Other teams, Major League Baseball has taken over production of their broadcast. I'm guessing that's what would happen with the Braves. The Braves are a different animal, though. That's a bigger market. I don't know that it would be just a 1-for-1 like they did with the Diamondbacks or the Padres or whoever. So again, if Diamond Sports does not come out of bankruptcy court, and we should know in the next, the hearing is Thursday and Friday. I don't know that we'll get an answer Thursday, Friday. It might be Monday, Tuesday before we actually get a ruling. But in the next probably 5-7 days, we'll have an answer to this. And if they get approved, if the court approves the deal, then where you watch the Braves and how you watch the Braves in 2025 will largely go unchanged. You'll watch it on the same channel that you did last year, probably with the same announcers, Brandon, CJ, same pregame, same postgame, all that stuff will probably be the exact same. You probably won't even notice the difference. If their plan gets denied by the court, however, it's up in the air. And of course, we'll cover it. We're not going to just leave you guys out to dry. We'll cover it in its totality once we have more answers. But that hearing is this week. And so we are finally, after about an 18-month-long bankruptcy court battle, we're kind of nearing the end of this thing where we're finally going to get some answers and, hopefully a little clearer picture of where and how you can watch Braves baseball moving forward.
Absolutely. And it's important, right? Because, that's, with the Braves being as big of a regional, overall asset that they are. I know that's why Diamond Sports Group wants to hang on to them, but I know that's why the Braves want the most for their fan base, to be able to make it to where they can view them as, easily as possible. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out for the rest of the offseason. One final move of note, happened on Monday, Stephen. The Braves did make a trade, and it was for a shortstop, Nick Allen from the Athletics. The Braves sent over minor league pitcher Jared Johnson in exchange for Nick Allen. Now, those who, know going into this offseason that shortstop probably was one of the more clear areas where the Braves could use an upgrade. If your initial reaction to this trade was that Nick Allen was the Braves' solution to basically fill their shortstop position, that's not it at all. This move is very much reminiscent of past moves that we've seen. This is a move much closer to a Zach Short or a Luke Williams than it is bringing in somebody who's probably even going to have a chance to challenge Orlando Arcia for the shortstop position. But one thing that I think is of note, Stephen, is that Alex Anthopoulos has made these type of moves before. Now, I think there's just as much of a chance that Allen gets designated for assignment due to another move before the offseason is over than it is that he actually is on the 40-man roster or on the opening day roster. But his key strength is defense. And I think that is something that the Braves consistently show with their moves when it comes to the shortstop that they want. They want strong defenders. That's the reason why Orlando Arcia has maintained his job over the past couple of years, despite his offensive struggles, the reliability of his defense. And with that in mind, I'm not saying that if the right opportunity came along, the Braves wouldn't go try to get a shortstop upgrade, but anybody who's potentially hoping for some type of big trade, or maybe the Braves going and spending the money that would take to bring in Willy Adames, I just don't see it happening. I think at the very least it's unlikely, because at the end of the day, they want to value good defense at the shortstop position because it's cheaper to be able to find that than someone who is an offensive producer. I may be reading too much into this move, but I think that that's a fair takeaway. What are your thoughts from the acquisition of Nick Allen?
Yeah, it was an interesting move for a couple of reasons. Nick Allen is on the 40-man roster. He was a major league player with the A's. So obviously when you get traded, if you're on the 40-man roster of the team that you're leaving, you automatically get put on the 40-man roster of the team that you're joining. So he's on the 40-man roster. He has no minor league options, which is critical here. Because, if he had minor league options, then you would say, well, this is just a guy you can play at Gwinnett. If you have some injuries, he can be kind of an insurance policy. So you're not having to sign Whit Merrifield and Gio Urshela off the scrap heap because you don't have anybody else. But the fact that he doesn't have minor league options, it complicates it. I actually thought, as soon as I saw the move, well, the first thing I did when I saw the move was I looked up Nick Allen to see how good of a player he was. He has really good minor league numbers in terms of offense. His major league numbers across 3 seasons with the A's legitimately may be the worst offensive profile I've ever seen in my life. I'd never seen some of the numbers. Like his average exit velocity over like 3 years with the A's is like 83 miles an hour, which is, I don't know if I've ever seen that. Like Ender Inciarte was like 84, 85 back when he was a Brave, and he was, the slappiest hitter of all slap hitters. So this guy is a zero power, offensive, player. He's, like you said, it's a very much a defensive job that he's holding currently. So obviously I wouldn't be surprised at all if they DFA'd him to try to clear him get him through waivers so they could send him to Gwinnett. That's what I think is going to happen. You get these guys in the offseason that kind of go through this whole shuttle of getting claimed and then DFA'd and then claimed and then DFA'd, and teams are just trying to get them to clear waivers so they can send them to Gwinnett or, the minors. And as a minor league player, Nick Allen makes a lot of sense for the Braves to have depth, but the fact that he doesn't have options complicates that. So they're going to have to figure out a way. I'm guessing they'll DFA him at some point to see if they can get him to clear waivers and they can send him down. But if he's on the team, he's obviously going to be a backup. And that's kind of the other notable thing to me is when I saw the Braves were looking for backup shortstops, it kind of told me that the Braves aren't necessarily looking to improve the starting shortstop, because if the Braves were looking to improve the starting shortstop, Orlando Arcia would be the backup shortstop. And so you can kind of connect the dots there. I do think other needs have jumped shortstop. I think outfield with the Acuna injury and Kelnick being so bad last year, I think, high leverage reliever now is a place they got to go add. and starter, I think all of those have jumped shortstop in terms of what the Braves need. I think the Braves think if they can bat Orlando ninth, they can live with it. I don't love it. I desperately want the Braves to move on from Orlando, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen this offseason. We'll see. Things could change. But yeah, when I saw that move, first thing I thought was he doesn't have any minor league options, so he's probably going to get DFA'd soon. Second thing I thought was, wow, this guy can't hit at all. He's going to be the backup shortstop, and I'm guessing Orlando is going to be the starter next year. But we'll see.
Well, and the thing that we'll hit on, as we wrap up this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast, is that I don't want anyone, to each their own how they feel, but I think it's important to mention that, one of the factors playing into does it make sense for the Braves to try to truly go after a shortstop upgrade is kind of the lack of options, right? Like we talked about it on the trade show. There's just not many like middle tier shortstop options out there. If it's a left-handed hitting shortstop, it likely is a franchise type player that you either don't want to pay the price to go get, or the team that has him don't want to trade him. I know we talked about Corey Seager. I highly doubt that that's, going to happen. You yourself said he's not going to be on the team. But even when it comes to free agency, I don't necessarily think the Braves are going to pay more than Dansby Swanson got from the Cubs to try to get Willy Adames. Ha-Seong Kim does make some sense, but there's a lot of teams who are going to be going after his services. I do think he would be a great addition this offseason for the Braves, but that's one option. That's one option. And that's why I think it makes sense for Atlanta. I don't necessarily know if makes sense is the right word. That's why I get the logic behind that if they're going to spend significantly, it likely is going to be in the outfield where they can have multiple options that they can go to based off price and all that different stuff versus potentially going overboard or paying too much for a shortstop upgrade.
Yeah, I mean, that's the argument. That's the logic of it, is that, you're limited. Alex says this all the time. You're limited to the options out there. If you need a shortstop, you're limited to who's available. And Willy Adames is the biggest name on the list, but like the Dodgers are in on Willy Adames. Potentially the Mets are on Willy Adames. There was a report that he's willing to change positions, maybe play third. That opens up his market to maybe a bunch of other teams too. And so, if you're having to compete with the Dodgers and the Mets for anybody, that's not a great start. And then, like you said, Kim has some injury stuff that's tricky. The contract is, the predictions are all over the place. Nobody has any idea what Kim's going to get. He might be priced out of Atlanta as well. So, yeah, I mean, you just look at the options. There's not a ton of great options. I still love my guy Willie Castro for the Twins, who can play shortstop, but that's a long shot just because so many names out there. The odds of that being the one name they trade for is pretty low. But yeah, my guess is Orlando's going to be the starter next year. And the Braves look to upgrade everywhere else. They look to upgrade the outfield, upgrade the rotation, upgrade the bullpen. And, you can make that case that that's the right way to go. I'm not saying they're wrong for that. I'll have to see the actual names that get added to the team before I pass any judgment. But I can understand the logic where there's just not a lot of names available for that position, and you're not going to force anything. So you try to upgrade the other areas of the team where there are names you like. And I think that's what the Braves are going to do.
And who knows? We talk about, having faith that Sean Murphy can regain his offensive, value, in the near future. I know Orlando Arcia never had the track record of a Sean Murphy, but hey, we're 18 months removed from Orlando Arcia being an all-star because of how good he was in the 2023 season. Don't get me wrong, I'm not being facetious. I'm not saying he's going to do that again, but my point is that it seems as if the Braves may be more satisfied with just sticking for Orlando than some may hope. But if that's the case, hopefully they'll make the upgrades elsewhere to make it to where offense from Orlando is not as big of a need moving forward. Steven, do you have anything else for us on this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast?
No. We're getting free agent contracts now. Travis d'Arnaud is the big one that happened today, but a Braves move could pop at any point. And obviously when it does, we'll be here to cover it. We usually try to get on within 30 minutes of the deal breaking. So, make sure you're subscribed, make sure you're, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all the places. We appreciate all the support as always.
Absolutely. And the great thing about it is that being a part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts, you have great perspectives to be able to enjoy from many different teams. In terms of what teams could be going after Juan Soto, that's not the Braves, but you have a plethora of Foul Territory Team podcasts that could be talking about that. Whatever you choose to listen to, that content will be there for you wherever you choose to subscribe, along with Hammer Territory, YouTube, Spotify, wherever, Apple, wherever you choose to listen, that's where we'll be for free. Just hit that subscribe button wherever you listen, and that will allow for us to reach as many people as possible that enjoy our content. For Stephen Tolbert, you can find him at _outliers on Twitter /X. My name's Shawn Coleman at StatsSAC on Twitter /X, at Hammer Territory, across all forms of social media. Until next time, go Braves. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory Podcast.